have to tell you something. Sorry, I need to tell you something. A secret about a place near where I live, just around the corner actually. You do not have to believe me. I understand that it may sound crazy. All I know is that I will never go there again. Not at night anyway, for I have experienced what lies within those endless trees. I was 14. It has taken me 2 years for me to finally tell you this, and I hope that you believe me. I had heard rumors about the woods, and my mother had told me to never go in there, not even in the daylight. I used to always defy my mother, and so I went in there with a couple of friends one night. The walk there was fine. I was eager to go to these so-called dangerous woods. Well, when we reached our destination, my heart already began to thump against my chest. The woods looked terrifying at night. I stood almost horrified amongst my friends. I no longer wanted to go inside. The trees towered over us. Its branches were like open arms welcoming us into the darkness. It was too dark to see what lay within them. Not even the moon could light up the shadows. I had an uneasy feeling about the woods, and I begged my friends that we should go home. Well, as you could probably guess, it pissed them off. I had dragged them out here to go into the woods, and now I was backing out. It's not like me to back out of things, but I did not want to go into those woods. We argued amongst ourselves. My friends were all against me, and thus, the decision that was decided was that we go into those woods. And so, we went in. The next morning, news broke out about the group of 14-year-old boys that had been butchered to death in the woods. I felt nothing for them. I told them I did not want to go into those woods. I told them that I had an uneasy feeling about the place. I was scared. I remember it so clearly. The 4 of them had decided to tell ghost stories just to add to my fear. One told of a man who lived in the woods, who was a lover of children's flesh. He would take them from behind when they were wandering through the woods alone, and would... That's when my friends decided to run off. I chased after them, trying to follow their laughter. It wasn't long before my ears had guided me into another direction, and silence surrounded me. I was scared so much that I began to cry. Not something that a 14-year-old boy should be doing, but I was fucking scared. My eyes couldn't adjust to the light, and I was left standing in what seemed like the endless black fog. This is how I pictured hell. I couldn't stop thinking about that story. I had horrible thoughts of how it ended. I was convinced it was real. Terrified, I started a slow jog through the woods. I know it sounds stupid, but sprinting just makes it feel more scary. I had picked up a rather large branch that obviously snapped off one of the trees. Not much of a weapon, but it would have to do. And I tried to find my way out. It seemed like I'd been running for ages. Maybe I'd been running in circles. I tried turning around and running in a different way. Well, after maybe 4 hours of running, I saw a light through the trees. A street light. I gave a sigh of relief and sprinted towards the light when something grabbed onto my shoulder. My heart stopped. I stopped breathing. My eyes were glued to the light. So close. I let out a tear. It laughed. Then, 3 other laughs followed. It was my friends. They continued to laugh and started to jeer. Out of pure anger, fear, and humiliation, I gripped onto the broken tree branch and beat all 4 of them to death. I could not see their blood, but I could smell it. I smiled. You don't have to believe me. I understand. It may sound crazy. Or maybe I'm crazy. I gradually became aware that I was awake again, sadly. I enjoyed those fleeting moments of unconscious sleep, where the minutes and hours slowly drift away, and then pick up speed until you were redlining in fifth gear. Then blam, awake again. Who knows how much later? 15 minutes or 10 hours, time used to be relative. What I really like about sleeping was that if I was lucky, I could dream. During the time where my body simply was, my mind could weave a beautiful tapestry where I wasn't bound by the laws of physics. I could run and jump, socialize with others, and even eat food again. I miss food a lot. When I was stuck being what I call awake physically, I could do nothing. I don't mean that I had nothing to do, but that I could not move a muscle. I wasn't paralyzed. Even a quadriplegic can blink and move their eyes around. At least, they can breathe and have a heartbeat. Not that looking around would have done much for me. I had been in the darkness for longer than I could fathom. Or maybe not. I had no way of telling time. I wore a watch, but it didn't glow in the dark. No backlit digital screen for me. I vaguely remember that at one point, I thought I could hear the soft ticks of the watch as the hands made their rounds. I don't get to hear those soft ticks any longer. That is one thing I would change if I could go back. I would change lots of things if I could go back. But if anything, I would have worn a digital watch that displayed the time of day or the day of the week. If I could just find one that would show the month too, I would drain every penny in my checking account and take a bank loan just to have it. Ideally, I would change other things first. I would have worn a helmet when I got onto my motorcycle. I would have looked both ways before I pulled out in front of that oil truck. I would have maybe also gotten one of those blood donor cards for my wallet, and then the paramedics would have known what my blood type was. So yeah, mistakes were made that day. But if I couldn't change the outcome, I would have worn a different watch. I don't recall much after the impact. I remember a fire truck, some paramedics, but it gets fuzzy. I do clearly remember the medic telling the doctor that I was a motorcyclist with no helmet, involved in a side impact collision with a large vehicle. Side impact my ass. When an oil truck T-bones a bike in a 55, the truck runs your ass over. The doctor just shook his head and mumbled that us bikers were just organ donors anyways. I probably would have been one too if my insides weren't gelatin. There was a funeral. Somehow, it was an open casket, and I got to see who came and who didn't. Who cried and who just looked at me and shook their head. As much as I tried though, I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. All I could do was just be there with some vague consciousness that I was there and what was around me. Sadly, those were the good times. Things only got worse from there. My casket was closed and I never saw light again. I heard the thud of dirt as they covered my casket, and then I was completely alone, with nothing but the soft rhythmic clicking of my wristwatch to keep me company. Just me, my thoughts, and my wristwatch. I don't know how long I've been down here in this hole, but I really wish I had worn a different watch. It has been 2 weeks since this whole thing started. It all started with a tanker accident. It was all over the news. Everyone thought it was just another oil spill. There were plenty of volunteers, plenty of people wanting to help poor defenseless animals, plenty of victims. Within hours of the tanker accident, it started happening. The animals had gone crazy. They were scratching and biting the cleanup volunteers. They said that it was an adverse effect of whatever was in that tanker. Rescue workers were still trying to get the crew out of the ship. They could hear screaming inside, screams to open the doors. But that's when it all went to hell. As soon as they cut the door open, there were 6 minutes of broadcast before it went silent. 6 minutes of screaming in agony. The ship crew attacked the rescue workers like rabid baboons, breaking bones and tearing flesh. The people on the shore weren't faring any better. Those that had been attacked by animals were attacking everyone else. It was worse than any war zone reported. It was sheer brutality, and yet the broadcast still went on for 6 minutes. 6 minutes, and then blank faces. Nobody could explain what was happening. They tried to continue with regular news, the economy, the weather, a cute human interest story, but they couldn't make us unsee what we saw. I tried to continue with my regular existence, but every time I switched on the news or walked by a newsstand, it was there. This big mystery. They had some explanations, some kind of infection, brain parasites, but it didn't matter. It wasn't an infection we were afraid of. It was them. 4 days after the initial report, a state of emergency was raised. And yet, we'd all seen this before. Every zombie movie ever. People didn't know who to trust. People were stockpiling food and weapons. Some tried to flee, but it seems every zombie movie was right. They didn't make it. 3 days later, they arrived in my town. I expected moans, shuffling corpses, dismemberment, but that's where the movies lied. They ran through the streets, screaming. I remember running to my front door as fast as I could, locking, barricading, doing anything to make sure it would stay shut, and then I headed for the window. I was on the second story, and I could see the carnage. They were unstoppable. They were aware. A group of them made their way through the building across the street. They jumped straight through the plate glass windows. Even the shards slicing through them made no difference. They just kept coming. My barricade wasn't going to hold. I rushed around my flat, grabbing supplies and jamming them into the most secure room of the flat. I went back for one last look across the street, and I wish I hadn't. In a second-story window, my face met one of theirs. They knew where I was. I quickly dashed into the room and locked the door. I don't have any kind of panic room or a secure basement, so the safest place I could think of was my bathroom. No windows, one door with a lock. I had filled my sink and bathtub full of water, so I could stay here for a while. So I sat there in the dark room, with the distant screams in my ears. I began to feel that I may have overreacted. It had been 2 hours and no sign of them. It actually got quieter and I thought they had moved on. Maybe I could leave the room, get to the kitchen, grab more food to wait it out. A crash came from the front door. The sound of someone running full force into the door and knocking down the barrier behind it. There was a couple more crashes before I knew they were inside. Rapid footsteps, moving around the flat. A couple of screams and then a bang on the wall beside me. My eyes were open to their widest, even in the pitch black darkness of the room. Another bang, and another. They knew I was there, and they knew I was scared. This was the zombie nightmare I had been expecting from the start. I had nowhere to run. There was only so much time before they would break in. I sat with my back to the door, hoping my extra weight would make it harder for them to get in. And then it got worse. "Why don't you open the door?" A voice on the opposite side of the door. No screams or moans, just a quiet, whispery voice, and then more of them. "We've come for you. You'll be happier if you open the door. It's not so bad." The whispery voices became a cacophony of noise, trying to persuade me, to break me, to fool me. I had heard that the moaning of the zombies would drive people insane, but this was worse. A siren call. I sat in the darkness and hoped and prayed that they'd get bored. But they don't get bored, and they don't leave. I managed to use the mirror to peek under the door, only to be greeted by horrible unblinking eyes, blood-smeared faces, screams, and more horrible whispers. That was 2 days ago. I don't know what to do anymore. Maybe it won't be so bad. Some neighborhood kids and I are going to commit a felony tonight, but it's no big deal. We've been committing a felony for almost 2 weeks now. We've developed a new pastime, and this all began when Cody Winters told us about the railroad game. This is the type of shit that happens when you live in a quaint suburb filled with kids and teenagers that have nothing better to do. Let me explain. Back in the late 60s, the Iron Front Rail Line bought a chunk of property behind our suburb, and the tracks were laid down and connected to a nearby route. The construction's completion drew the attention of all the neighborhood punks who were searching for something to tear up. In the process, the railroad game was created. The rules of the game are very simple, just like its name. All of the players line up beside the track, and the object of the game is to jump over all the tracks and reach the other side before the train plows through. The player to jump last is the winner. Sometime around 1976, the last game was won by a 15-year-old Richie Baker. I say won because Richie did in fact win the game. His feet touched the gravel on the other side, but within seconds, Richie's jacket was caught on one of the pistons, and he was sucked straight under. He was crushed to death by endless railroad cars, and Cody claims that body parts were scattered a mile or so up track. That seemed a bit ridiculous to me. However, after the unfortunate accident, police closed off the area. They forced Iron Front to build a fence around the property to prevent youths from wandering onto the tracks. Nowadays, the barbed wire fence is a piece of junk. We discovered a rusted section instantly, and we easily busted through. Despite the obvious implications of this game, Cody convinced about 6 of us to play it with him. Some of us were skeptical, and I'm really not surprised since Cody got this story from his older brother who was in college. Cody's brother claimed that the railroad game used to be popular when he was a child. It was just one of those trends that became a legacy in our neighborhood. To Cody's knowledge, no one had ever been seriously hurt aside from that freak accident. Plus, if any of us won the game, we'd be the coolest kid in the neighborhood. It's not like we weren't playing it safe. We practiced endlessly. That's why we've been going down to Iron Front every other night. We wanted to practice before playing the game for real. On most nights, 2 trains would pass through, and if we were really lucky, there would be a third. The rules of the game are simple, but it's all mind over matter. You just have to ignore the train's whistle and the massive freighter running towards you at 100 miles an hour. It's all about developing timing. When we just started, We'd jump way too early, and we could count for several Mississippis before the train passed. Tonight, though, we were ready to play the game for real. Our first train was a practice round, and we were waiting for our second. In the distance, we heard the distinctive chugging sound, followed by a high-pitched whistle. I lined up beside the track with the other boys and cocked my head to the side, seeing a headlight turn the corner. I clenched my fists and watched a dark locomotive bellow black smoke as it chugged closer and closer. One by one, the boys began jumping across the tracks. I wouldn't jump yet. I could wait a few moments longer. I wasn't about to chicken out after all that practice. I take my eyes off the train and glance to see who's left beside me, and we both jump. My feet landed perfectly in the gravel as the train barreled inches behind me. Before I could even react, there was a loud pop like compressed air exploding. I would later find out that that sound was of Cody's leg shattering beneath the freight cars. The pop was nothing like the screams or the spray of crimson blood on the tracks. I never knew how powerful the scent of blood could be. It was in the air. I could practically taste it. There was nothing we could do. We could only watch as the cars kept coming, crushing Cody's lower half to a pulp. His agonized screams died down eventually. I don't feel sorry for him though. He knew the risk of playing the game, and I'm not afraid of playing dirty. For almost 40 years, I have been the undisputed champion, and nobody is going to take that from me. For my niece's 6th birthday, I bought her a Barbie doll. She loved dolls and stuffed animals, and loved playing pretend with them even more. Whenever I stopped by my sister's house, I could always hear my niece playing with her toys, speaking to them as if she was having wonderful conversation and would sometimes make her dolls talk back. When she unwrapped the doll, her eyes lit up, and she immediately opened the packaging to play with her new toy. Her eyes lit up and exclaimed profoundly that this particular Barbie was one she had never seen before. I bit my tongue and just smiled. I couldn't spend too much money on my niece, even though I loved her to pieces. I had to rummage through the garage sale next door to find her a gift. The Barbie was at least 10 years old, and this design was no longer being produced, and the man who was running the sale, older in age and set to retire, seemed happy to see it leave. He said he'd had it for so long that he thought no one would have a chance to play with it. My niece spent all afternoon playing pretend with her toys and having a tea party, so I knew the gift was a hit. The next day, my sister called me and said that she found the contest entry form tucked inside the Barbie doll's packaging and was preparing to take my niece to the contest a few cities away. I laughed and asked her to check the entry form for an expiration date. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Hello?" I asked for my sister, thinking maybe the call had been dropped. "Are you still there?" Yeah, my sister replied, her voice trembling with fear. "What's wrong?" I asked. "The entry form doesn't have an expiration date. Why did you ask me to check?" Because I didn't want to say anything that might frighten my already shaken sister. I found the doll at a garage sale. That's why it's older than the other dolls and you can't find them in store. I heard my sister stifling a whimper. just Googled information about the contest. And? I waited impatiently for her to tell me what she had discovered. And the contest was a scam, a trap for children. What? I couldn't believe what she had just said. What do you mean, a trap? I found a newspaper article, she continued. 12 years ago, 6 little girls disappeared after entering a contest that didn't officially exist. 3 years after the disappearances, the girls' bodies were found in the woods 6 miles from the backyard of a known pedophile. The police found copies of the contest entry forms and discovered that he had been slipping the forms into the packages used to contain toys for little girls. I felt sick. My heart dropped and I couldn't get the horrible thought of losing my beloved niece to such a disgusting predator. What happened to the man? Where is he? After he was arrested and set to stand trial, he was released on a technicality. He skipped town, and no one has seen him since. That's not true, I practically whispered, my voice failing me as dread set in. I saw him only yesterday. He was right next door. Centuries ago, there was a demon named Peekaboo. It was a nasty thing, neither male or female, hatched from the dead volcano in pre-Inca South America. What was overwhelmingly known about this unholy creature was how it reveled in shock. It fed on it. The kind of shock that bypassed fear and dread and instead stuck with an immediate and pure terror. Tales tell that Peekaboo had scaly pale hands, which were riveted to his face by rows of iron nails. These ghastly hands obscured any skin, eyes, nose, or mouth underneath, if those were even there, for no one has seen the face of Peekaboo, or accurately, no one has survived seeing the face of Peekaboo. What Peekaboo did is wait. It would wait for hours, days, even weeks for its victims, crouching near a road or a home, shivering in day or night, with those foul hands over its face. Undoubtedly, someone would approach. It could be a passing tradesman, a group of soldiers, a parent, a wandering child, anyone who showed concern or curiosity. It knows we are empathetic beings, drawn to a person, someone sitting silently with their hands over their face, particularly if that someone seems pale, feeble, or needy. We need to see what's underneath. It is the face that draws us, that guides us. The face. The face previews the soul of a thing, and Peekaboo knows this about us. When we approach, it strikes, ripping its hands from its face, popping bloodied nails from skull and skin, and revealing its soul. That soul, that face, that horrific image stops blood, ruptures a heart, and kills in an instant. For centuries, its horrors were blamed on disease and the natural course of time and of things beyond human control. An old man's heart gave out. A soldier discovered dead. A mother succumbed to illness. A child never woke from a dream. An infant dead in its crib. These were its conquests, its meals. Legend tells that a tribe of Brujas, or Incan witches, finally captured Peekaboo in a golden maze of knotted ropes called a quipo, sealing it in an unmapped cave near a rocky coast of central Mexico. tales tell of the struggling for centuries, wriggling for escape, but never dying. And there it remains, hands affixed to its vile face, hammered there by an unknown and unending evil. As time passed and generations faded, the legend of this demon contorted decade by decade to the lie it is today. Mothers and fathers tend to their children with a game now, the pastime of Peekaboo, popping from a hiding place, stepping from a shadow, or leaning over a crib to simply cover their face and, with a smile, reveal what is hidden underneath. Peekaboo. The grin, the laughter, the innocence of it all betrays Peekaboo again and again. It knows. It feels the twist of its black legend, and a deep dark anger shakes those embedded nails and tugs at skin, desperate to wrench those hands away, reveal its rage, and feed. Legend says that each time we play his game, play Peekaboo, we test its legacy, and the quippo imprisoning Peekaboo stretches and frays, inching his horror closer to freedom. This same legend says that should one of us deem to imitate Peekaboo and amuse themselves by playing Peekaboo, his game, with 100 people in one lifetime, whether we know we have or haven't, Peekaboo will feel it. It will feel you are mocking it and challenging it, and it will target the foolish vanity that drives you to mimic its legacy. It knows it cannot leave its prison, but generations of witches hint that it may be able to send its face in place of yours. And when you smile at your friend, your brother, or your sister, your child, or your baby, when you reach up and cover your face with your hands and gently whisper Peekaboo, in that instant, it will have found you. And when you lift your hands away, the face you show, the soul you reveal to your loved one, may not be your own. So ask yourself, how many times have you played Peekaboo? So I discovered the meaning of life, or at least, that's what my eager customers are led to believe. You see, 2 or 3 times a month, I post a listing titled, The Meaning of Life, to various auction sites. I couple it with a sappy picture of a sunset or rainbow, and a description that reads, all views are subjective, results may vary. Most people wouldn't bat an eye at such a ridiculous listing. But there are some gullible folks out there that take the bait. When the bidding ends, I usually take home anywhere between $5 to $12. After I've received my money via PayPal, I ship out the item. What is the item, you might ask? Well, I scribbled down an inspirational quote or life lesson onto a piece of paper and mail it out in your standard letter-sized envelope. The quotes are usually from famous writers, historical figures, or the Bible. Some of them include, "If light is in your heart, you will find your way home," quoted from Rumi. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, quoted from Maya Angelou. "It's never too late to be what you might have been," quoted from George Eliot. And that's it. 1 stamp, a drop in the mailbox, and my work is done. It's as simple as that. You might call me a scammer or a con artist, or perhaps even a plagiarist, and in truth, you are correct. I'm taking advantage of the naive people out there who are possibly looking for a sense of purpose in life, Also, I can make a quick buck. But I'd like to think most people know it's fake and purchase it just to see what I'll send them. Besides, I'm a bachelor right out of college. As long as I can make a small dent in my phone bill and eat a packet of ramen each night, I'll sleep just fine. As you might imagine, I received quite a bit of hate mail. I've learned to ignore angry emails and private messages on auction sites. As soon as I see it's from one of my customers, it gets deleted. I do, however, receive the occasional snail mail. It's unavoidable as my P.O. box is listed on all of the envelopes I send out. It would be pretty easy for me to toss these letters in the trash with the rest of my junk mail, but I never can. Something about receiving a physical letter from someone, good or bad, compels me to read it. Anyone who takes the time to write one deserves to have their voice heard, even if I don't really care for what they have to say. The more and more letters I receive, the more and more amused I am by them. To paint a better picture, here's a few of my favorite quotes from the fan mail I've received over the years. You're nothing but a glorified fortune cookie service. You'll rot in hell for the sins you've committed, mark my words. You're a real fucking piece of shit, you know that? It's reached a point where reading these letters has become the highlight of my week. I've even tacked up some of the better ones on a corkboard in my bedroom. You might think that's sick and a little messed up, but I think it's hilarious. Not all of the letters I receive are bad though. There's one guy by the name of Big Red, like the gum I guess. That's all he ever writes above his return address, who mails me constantly. He sends me inspirational quotes in exchange for mine. I assume he's a repeat customer who actually enjoys paying for and receiving cheerful messages in his mailbox every now and again. The first quote Big Red ever sent me was, "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time." From Mark Twain. Though there was nothing else in the message, this was such a great first impression, as Mark Twain is one of my favorite authors. The quote was much appreciated. As such, I hung it up next to the hate mail on my corkboard. Another thing that's great about the quotes Big Red sends me is that I can re-gift them to my customers. It saves me time for looking for quotes online. It's true that I could send out the same quote more than once, but that just isn't my style. I like to think that there's a good chunk of people out there who enjoy the sayings I send them, and who might actually be repeat customers like Big Red. If so, I've got to have a little variety. Some of the things Big Red sends me, however, are not re-gift material. Some quotes he sends are morbid and depressing, and other times, he'll send me small packages containing little trinkets that I have no use for. It's a little weird, but I figure the guy is depressed and just needs a friend. Maybe the quotes he bought from me were the only thing he had to look forward to each morning. Perhaps the things he sends me are his way of saying thanks. To me, it's validation that what I'm doing isn't completely sleazy. But here's where things get weird. Today, I received another envelope from Big Red. I actually smiled when I pulled it out of my P.O. box. His letters and gifts were just as much, if not, more of a highlight to my week than the endlessly entertaining hate mail. Upon opening the envelope, my smile vanished. Inside was a photograph of me, taken up close through my bedroom window. On the back of the photograph was another one of Big Red's quotes. "You look so alone. Where's the meaning in your life?" We all have a skeleton in our closet. We have those things that we don't want people to find out. We have those things that we don't want to remember and wish we could put them away in some place where no one will be able to find it. However, you can't outrun your regrets and your troubles. They always have a way of catching up with you. Personally, I've grown tired of running from this regret of mine, so I believe it's time I get everything off my chest. When I was in high school, like most, I had a good group of friends. There were only 5 of us, but we would always be hanging out. We were really good friends, and we thought that it would last forever. We thought it would, but we all ended up going to different colleges. We hung out every now and then, but we slowly started drifting apart. Our group had dissolved by the time our first year of college ended. We had also made new friends outside our respective colleges, and it was a lot easier hanging out with these people than the people in our group. Halfway through our senior year, however, we decided to have a little get-together so we could recreate how things were back in the day. I guess we were all feeling a little nostalgic and wanted things to go back to the way they were in high school. Anyways, everything was a little awkward at first. It had been a few years since we all saw each other last. Everyone was there, and we all ended up having a blast, and we decided to make it a weekly thing. We would all convene at a predetermined location on the same day every week. The next week, the 5 of us, Nick, Ellen, James, Chris, and myself, met up at a bowling alley. We thought it would be fun to do some bowling. Again, we had a great time, and we kept going on with doing these weekly meetups. We had been doing this thing for a good month or so, and at one point, Nick just stopped showing up. I heard that he'd gotten into doing drugs, and that his druggy friends kept putting pressure on him to hang out with them more often. I actually didn't like him that much anyways. He was so annoying, and he tried forcing his opinions on us. Despite Nick's disappearance, we continued to do these meetups. The atmosphere had gotten a little more awkward. We still had a really good time though. One thing I learned through these meetups was that out of all of us, Chris and Ellen were the only people who had stayed in contact with each other. Apparently during high school, they had gotten together. So we hung out a few more times. We had gone to an arcade and hung out at some of our houses. One week, we decided to play some video games at James's house. Everyone who at this point usually showed up was there, save Chris. Ellen was just sitting there, sobbing the entire time. Whenever I tried asking her about Chris, she wouldn't respond and just cried some more. I guess they broke up or something. They seemed to be a good couple, but I'm not too sad. I remember I had a crush on her and Chris knew it, but he got together with her anyway. Well, after that, Ellen stopped showing up, so it was just James and me, and we went our separate ways shortly thereafter. James and I never really saw eye to eye anyways. It's been about a few months since our group split up again, and I still can't get the smell of death coming from my closet to go away. I thought their bodies would have stopped decaying by now.